Really pleased to introduce Michael, who's a colleague. I know Michael quite well and been on the same platform with you in a strike, indeed, haven't we, Michael? So really looking forward to what you're going to say. And again, what's nice about Michael, which is the same as one or two of our speakers over the next 2 days, is that Michael also spoke on the 21st of January. So we're kind of carrying on that. I really like it in the work we do, where we actually carry on that conversation. We carry on moving the knowledge on and developing that knowledge, and it's in our new situation with the pandemic. Okay, so I can't see Michael's face or picture or anything else. It's still Sarah's. So I'm not too sure what we need to do. Michael, are you there?
Can you hear me, Liz?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Just trying to find how we get you though.
So
I'll get rid of myself.
Okay, so the webcam doesn't work on my laptop, but I should be. Right. I'm trying to share the screen. It's saying screen sharing now.
The screen is shared, so if you want to just speak, and we'll just know that we can't see you and that is fine.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks. So I'll try and rejoin on my phone for the breakout sessions.
No worries.
But yes, got technical problems. So as long as you can share this, see the screen, then
the screen's fine.
Okay, so yeah, thank you very much for the invite to be part of this session. And as I'm sure was picked up in my earlier questioning from Sue's provocation, that somewhat speaks to the topic that I'm going to be presenting today. A little note as well, it was really pleasing for me to see that two of the members of the North East Young Dads and Lads project are in on this webinar this afternoon. So I think that's really great, and it speaks to the idea that these are issues out with the academy as well as inside. Just for anybody who did want to follow up beyond my talk this afternoon with any questions, this is how to get in touch with me. And as Liz said, this very much develops from some of the questions that I had raised in an earlier Institute of Social Science session. So for those who were there, this might be some repetition, but if you can please excuse that to try to contextualize the work that I'm putting forward. So the North East Young Dads and Lads project is a fantastic organization who are working with young men who are fathers over a prolonged period of time, based primarily in Gateshead and emerged out of originally a young women's project. This aspect, I think, is particularly noteworthy, especially given some of the recent research coming out from the Fawcett Society and the Women's Budget Group, detailing, for example, 51% of families with young children struggling to make ends meet in the months of May, June and July of this year in amongst the COVID-19 pandemic. But this work is largely based on cohabiting couples or of women-led households. So the questions then become, what role can fathers play in their children's lives? And also specifically for the purpose of this afternoon, how and in what ways has the COVID-19 pandemic adversely impacted upon the ability to care? So the group largely works in the following ways that are detailed on your screen there. And ultimately the group is to present a father-friendly space for young men to come together and parent their children independently. The vast majority of them are demonstrating improved parenting and relationship skills, building positive peer support networks, establishing and or renegotiating child contract arrangements, addressing addiction, non-mental health issues, understanding legal and financial rights and obligations, and then much more hopefully the ability to develop employability skills and to access employment. And on this particular point, the project has seen some recent successes where actually the project has been able to actually hire some of the young men who have progressed through the program into paid roles, such as paid peer mentors and peer link workers. Really where I wanted to situate today's conversation is in response to this idea of the pandemic being the great leveler, which of course our government likes to put forward. What we know, however, from the research is that young fathers under the age of 25 are known to be at high risk of social isolation and loneliness, which has only been further amplified in the context of COVID-19. This is especially so for non-resident young dads, many of whom who don't have access to their children. And this has been particularly difficult during the pandemic for a combination of prohibitive factors, anything from public transportation costs and the inherently linked transmission fears upon traveling via public transport. So again, we see this idea that those who are able to travel privately are much less adversely affected by this. But also some overprotective parenting from the maternal family members, lack of support and resources from services for supervised visits. And then what we're increasingly realizing is this role of digital poverty, which I'll hopefully get onto shortly. But my pilot work over the past 2 years, which has been supported by the Institute of Social Sciences, has found that young men, the vast majority of them, feel stigmatized by the mainstream services representing the social care, education and health, and forcing them to confront the pressures, therefore, of navigating family, partner and peer relationships all alone. This is where the project comes to the fore. This can lead to negative assumptions, which in turn translate into further marginalization by practitioners. And this has only been further intensifying their experiences of extreme loneliness and social isolation. So specifically, the project has worked around this idea of reading and literacy rates, which I won't have time to go into in particular depth, other than to say that I worked on a project with 7 Stories, the National Centre for Children's Books. Why this mattered is really because what is found in the literature is that reading is particularly important for child development, but how can that be achieved, or how can that be promoted and encouraged with young men who themselves have poor levels of literacy rates? Promising, the work from the Scholastic report in 2015 noted that not all engaged readers come from privileged homes, and significantly that engaged readers from poorer backgrounds outperformed less engaged readers from more privileged homes. This was also found earlier in that reading for pleasure was found to be more significant for children's cognitive development than the parents' level of education. So this is really key, the idea of creating positive reading environments. So if we bring this forward to negotiating lockdown, this is just one example from a Zoom call with one of the young fathers who announced, very boldly, how do you socially distance with a 2-year-old? This was in relation to anxiety around the return to nursery for the child, although I do note today's government revised guidance to say that actually this is very unlikely, and that nurseries and early years education is going to remain closed until probably September. Whilst it was positive to spend so much time with children during lockdown, which was mentioned by several of the young men, an acknowledgement that there was gaps in attainment, therefore, that even at this young age of 2, that she was being sort of behind with the reading, and a nervousness on the part of the father to be able to kind of fill that gap. And then the practical aspects which are related to that digital poverty aspect, which is that everything was expensive, the electric bill being through the roof when we're all stuck at home sitting on Zoom calls for hours every day, but also then the actual access to the technology, the cost of data and the reliance on poor internet and phone signals. So what has happened within the service is an increase of a digital offer. Interestingly, what was put forward by the Young Women's Project in Gateshead was an idea around a walking and talking service. What was found, or early indications from staff members within the organisation, was actually some resistance to this from some of the young men. This varied in rationale, but it could be captured sort of broadly speaking as safety concerns around wandering around the neighbourhoods, a fear of being seen as walking around as 2 single men, so the gendered implications of actually being a man in public space. And then some of the more geographical concerns, access to space for physical distancing, which is much more limited in an urban context. Financial barriers, again, linking to, or rather extending the problems around digital poverty, but actually limiting public transport use. And then something that was put forward as a more sort of exciting or freeing role would be to have sort of bike rides, which could extend the ability to go further, to find free and open space in green spaces and parks. But of course, there's a reliance therefore on those individuals who had their own access to a private bike.
We've got 2 minutes left, Michael.
Sure, thank you. So this brings us really to the digital storing app, which I've been developing with a research software engineer at Newcastle Data. So a prototype exists, which is for anybody who has played Pokemon Go, either with children or on their own, might get a little insight to what this effectively could look like. But the idea then that we've created an app for young men to be creative with their own children, to create confidence and develop literacy skills, but in a way which makes use of their own confidence and familiarity with building social relationships through devices and games, as opposed to books and texts and sort of pieces of paper. So reading as in a more creative way into that. Working in these ways has synergies with the Partners in Parenting education curriculum packages of the Family Nurse Partnership, and this is something with which we're currently discussing in the project. So really that kind of brings us to a close, and I'll leave with the references that was mentioned, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. That was really good. It was a great follow-up to our to your previous talk and our previous seminar. So I'm just going to start my video. And can you stop sharing your screen, please?
Sure. Stop share. Yes.
So unfortunately, you're only going to be able to see me, and I'm not the person answering the questions. But there you go. Because Michael's video is not working at the moment. So now I'm just wondering if there's anybody who would like to put in some questions for Michael, please can you do so? And I'm just wondering, I can start off the questions. I'm just wondering where do you think your app is going to take you? What do you think how are you going to develop it?
Well, there's a current funding application which we'll hopefully find out by the end of this month to the British Academy as part of their COVID-19 Special Research Grant, which effectively would be to roll out the programme more broadly to get more of the young men involved. We had 2 of the young men help create the prototype, but the idea would be to try to document the utility of the app in both the short, medium and longer terms. And really, as the app was designed, this was about sort of working in the city centre and sort of encouraging young men to explore the visitor centre at 7 Stories was essentially how the app had been originally formulated. But this organically had come out of the project that's been in existence for a few years, but of course the pandemic has created an increased need to make this much more local. And relevant to anybody's lives. So the idea would be that we would change the mapping technologies to actually make this bespoke so that anybody in any part of the world could log on, and the markers would therefore be fixed to their geolocation as opposed to being a prefixed route in Newcastle city centre.
No, that makes perfect sense. Other questions? Are there any other questions anybody wants to ask to type in? Otherwise, I'm going to move on now. There's a lot of people coming up saying that they really like your work. That's good. That's great. It's really nice to hear that. So let's move on. So thank you very much indeed, Michael. I'm going to give you a clap as well. So thanks an awful lot for your talk.
Thank you, and thanks for the feedback.
Thank you for coming along.